Welcome to the Buried Dreams podcast. I'm your host, Elle Morris. This episode we have Bartosz Beda, a Polish painter and contemporary artist living in Dallas, Texas. Bartosz is a dear friend, and it was lovely to dive into his life stories and hear his perspectives on business in the realm of art. For artist content and news on the latest Buried Dreams, follow us on Instagram at Buried Dreams Podcast. Enjoy. Thank you for coming on and having a chat with me.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So, what is your earliest memory in childhood of painting or being a painter?
I love this question. It goes back to the time when I was 7, maybe 6, 7. I had an older brother. I have an older brother who is 12 years older than me. And he was very into drawing and painting at that time. And I remember at that age of 7, I was already very jealous about his talent or like skills that he had. So I decided that I'm going to copy his drawings and paintings, or sometimes draw on his paintings or drawings, which he was not really happy about. And that was my kind of first kind of realization that I want to do that for a living, for like the rest of my life, and why I need to just do other things if I can just do that. And I remember going to my mom saying that I want to be an artist, and I remember to this day she just burst with a laugh, just like every mom would do probably, with that loving smile, saying that that's great, but artists starve. And I remember her saying that, and I said, no, I'm going to be a really famous artist. And I guess that was this moment and the realization that I want to do it. So I was just following it out from then on.
About how old were you?
I was 7 at that time. And around like age of 10, my parents sent me to professional painter, I think, or artist in like a visual arts, who was kind of instructing me a little bit and giving me some tips on how to draw and paint better. So after that, my high school, my parents sent me to like a magnet school. It was like a private school for drawing and painting or traditional art. And it was really great experience. I, to this day, have a great memories from that time.
Did they do the same for your brother?
No. At some point, he had a little bit different interest from drawing and painting. He was more interested in wood in general, like
Sculpting?
Not exactly. More like designing wood, what you can do with wood. I wouldn't call it carpenting or anything like that. It was something about interest in like an old type of furniture, antiques, toward something kind of more
building
modern.
Tables, chairs,
yes.
And
so
doors.
he went toward that direction, and now he has I wouldn't call it a big company, but like a small business in Poland, where he does the restorations of everything in wood, starting from like churches to private residences. So
you were born in Poland.
Yes.
And how long were you living in Poland, and how was it living in Europe and growing up in Europe now that you've had a taste of living in America?
I loved living in Poland. I experienced both countryside and the city life in Poland. I was born in a large city, at least large for Poland, and I grew up in countryside. So between age of like 4 to like 8, I was in countryside. So I had that vast of landscape around me, and beautiful weather, beautiful winters, all kinds of seasons that maybe also influence me as a person in one or another way. And then we moved to the city, and I remember my first experience with city was pollution. And even at that time, when it was not like a big subject as it is now for all the cities, I think that was one of the first things that I realized about living in the city, that everything has a different pace, and that pace brings a lot of other things with it, whether we like it or not. So I think that was something that I start realizing and just adjusting to it.
How did you use these elements in your art, or these understandings? How did they influence your art?
I think that over time, not only back to Poland, but also from living in the UK, I think that the pace of the city allowed me to think about my art as something that I have to think about as a task, not approach that with that philosophical or like a slow approach, but something that I have to just execute. And all other premeditations and thinking about it happens before that, whether I'm on the way to studio, whether I talk to someone or think about it when I'm just not in the studio. But when I'm in the studio, I try to work. So usually I just keep painting until I exhaust my energy, and then just leave it till the next day or next week, depends.
Yes, sometimes I feel like sleeping on stuff brings new ideas the next day.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that happens with a lot of things, and probably painting especially too, as not always the painting is finishing like in one session. It takes sometimes some time, maybe some weeks, or maybe some quick sessions, and then the realization that I need to slow down and go with it in a different way.
So you were living in Warsaw and Manchester, UK?
That was Łódź. It's about an hour and a half drive from Warsaw. They call it Polish Hollywood because this city was focused on movies production or movie production.
Interesting.
And actually that goes takes me to another interesting story. When I was graduating from my high school, my dad, who is not an artist, and he never really been related or surrounded like by art that much. He had maybe interest in art from like an outside perspective, but he had a lot of friends in the movie industry and just arts in general, partially because he was running his own businesses as well. So he kind of at some point got to know those people. And I remember I asked him if he can help me to get some internship at somewhere at the company or something related to art. And I remember he was the same day, he just called a couple friends. I think he called like a actor friend. And then he said like, yeah, I know those other people, they do animation, stop motion animation movies. And let's see if they're looking for somebody. And it happened to be that they had production of a stop motion short movie called Ichthys by Marek Skrobecki. And I remember it was like a small team of people on a very tight budget. So I went there, and it was a paid internship, but they didn't probably pay me as much as they would pay just a professional production member. And that actually paid off in a year or two in a way that they feature my name in the end of the
film?
The film, yes.
Nice.
And as one of the production member. And this movie got international attention. So it was displayed in BBC,
Wow.
one of those channels, and other awards. And then 2 years later, because of those attentions they got, um, the company, the movie production company, they got another contract for the Peter and the Wolf by Susie Templeton. It was a British production that took place in Poland. And I remember they called me if I want to be on the production for that movie as well.
What exactly was your role in that first film?
So in that first film, I just did everything and anything at the end. I was mostly building a stage for the shooting, and that was like my main kind of a job there. And meanwhile, when I had a little bit of a time, I just sat on the like a sculptor desk who was making sculptures of the puppets and all other figures that were taking part in that movie.
Were you painting the background?
Yes, so that was painting backgrounds, cutting it. So I had to build like a room that was imitating a stone, like a stone or like more like a church type of thing. And I remember I was sanding styrofoam and at the end painting it to give that imitation of the stone. And it was not fun job. I remember I didn't really like it. So I when I was there, I was trying to break it into like two sections. One section when I was doing this job, and the other one trying to experience other things and learn from them. It was a very interesting team. Those people are really knowledgeable and they really know what they're doing. And when I was there, I was thought I wish they actually get paid more for what they do, and their work is actually appreciated in greater value than it is. So yeah, that's.
I can say that for all artists and teachers, most artists. And
yeah, that's true. And maybe that's the problem of every industry. And closer we are to some specific fields, then we see those issues, and if not, then we just don't think about it. So after that, this small production, they brought this big budget production to Poland from England. And I remember I was at that time involved in the business, my brother business. He was already doing a restoration of old antiques and then selling them on secondary market. And I remember that production lady, she was calling me every day, trying to get in touch with me to bring me on the production. And I remember I didn't want to go because I just felt that those productions are great, but they're very short-term oriented. And she was calling on my brother's phone. And that day I argued with him. And when she called, he said, I'm not going to talk to her. He passed the phone to me. And at that point, I couldn't say no. So I spent about a year on that production. And at that point, I thought I'm going to do something either in sculpture or I'm going to stay in like a theater or movie production. Mm-hmm. And I thought that that's going to be my legit career. But I didn't like maybe two things. One of them was some of the people I worked with, they were very insecure, and it's almost like what's going to be the next project and I'm going to be on it or not. So it's a lot of like a gaming between talks that you have with those people. And I kind of didn't like it.
Yeah, that's the artist's life. You're a freelancer.
Yeah.
So you're waiting until you get the next job, and the future is uncertain. Nothing is guaranteed.
Yeah, that's true. And then the second thing that I didn't like was that uncertainty about what if I'm going to have like 6 months in between the next project. So what if I can have or make all those money now if I have to basically save them for the next 6 months that I might not work at all waiting for another production.
Were you being paid for this job?
Yes, that was a really well paid job at that point already. And it was just a normal job for me.
What kind of title? What kind of title did they give you?
So for that job, I was a puppet sculptor. So they had a main sculptor, or actually before Ivan got there, there was like a competition for puppets. So they like hired or like made like a competition for the look of the puppets. And so those sculptures, they kind of sculpted, and then they selected one. So she became like a master sculptor for the production. So she was making all those sculptures of the puppets. And then
I don't really understand
Yes.
this concept with the puppets. What kind of film was it?
it's like a stop motion movie. So
oh,
it's
like like the Pinocchio film.
Yeah, it's like a Pinocchio, yes.
Hmm.
And so she was a main sculptor, and she was making all those sculptures in like a scale of 1 to 5, let's say. And then they hired me to copy her sculptures into 1 to 5 and 1 to 3 scale. And then so I just kind of put that like exact copy of what she did. And then there were other artists who basically like polish the skin or give like a eye looking, eyebrow things kind of. So it's like when they zoom in on the puppet during the shooting, it has like enormous details that you know, it looks almost like realistic person.
Yeah, when I was in New York over New Year's, I visited the MoMA,
Mm-hmm.
the Museum of Modern Art, and they had a Pinocchio exhibit.
Mhm.
And I was so intrigued by how much work goes into these types of films, how long it takes, and how many people are involved. There are so many people involved. Just as you were saying with the sculpting, I mean, how many people were involved on that team?
I think altogether that team, maybe 10, 15 people. And I was just like one of them. It's not that I had like a major thing to do. It was big for me at that time already. But, you know, there were people there who had, you know, more responsible roles. And
How old were you?
I think I was 23, maybe 24, something like that.
Was this before or after you went to school?
Before I went to school in England, yes. And for that production, I think they hired over 100 people, like 120 or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a lot, and it was a big production, yes.
Was it in English, the movie?
Yes, the movie was in English, and actually this movie got an Oscar Prize in 2007, I believe, or 8.
Incredible.
So, yeah, it is incredible. And the funny thing is that I got to know about this award when I was already at Manchester School of Art. And yeah, it was an incredible kind of achievement, even if it's just a small part of me just doing something for it. But obviously I didn't get it. Just I guess entire production, just the movie got it. So that's big too.
Can you repeat the name of the film?
Peter and the Wolf.
Peter and the Wolf. I've heard of this.
By Susie Templeton.
Mm-hmm. I know this.
I think it's like a 10 minutes long movie. It's so amazing how much effort and time goes into it, and it's just like a 10-15 minutes production that can go good, that can be good, or anything can go wrong with it. So it's a big risk taking. So they have to really think about it through before actually they start it.
How long did the whole process take from beginning to end?
I was there for about a year, and altogether I think a year and a half, maybe 2 years, with like a sound and like a last finishing. So,
and imagine how much money they poured into that. Yes. For a 10-minute short film.
Yeah. So yeah, but I think that even for them at that point, they wouldn't be able to do it in England. They really were looking for a country where they can outsource it almost like for a way cheaper that they could do it there. So the city I lived in, it was perfect. It was just like a Polish Hollywood, and they had all those big studios, big manufacturing studios where they can just rent and then bring the team, and they even don't have to look far because really this city has like plenty of those talented people that can do those things.
So after you finished this film production. When did you decide to go to school in Manchester?
I think it's even more. I think it's the way I decided, or how to put it. I decided that I want to study abroad, like long before I actually made that decision. Like on that time, I'm going to the UK. It was more like when I was maybe even teenager or even like a kid. I was like dreaming about going abroad, just like doing things abroad, not in the country. And I think that's something maybe that relates to leaving the countryside and going to the city. I think that kind of transition, that feel of fear of that you're losing something and fear of what is next. I think that's something is like a motivational drive to do things. So I thought about it the same way when I decided that I want to study abroad. I knew that I want to do it. I just didn't know how and where and what. And at that time, Poland was already in the European Union. So they opened the borders to travel freely between the countries. So I just pick and choose England because I thought it's going to be easier to learn language. I didn't know any English at that time, like barely a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yes. So I just really packed myself. I even didn't take a plane. I remember I took the like a bus, like a coach, to drive there. And it was like a 2 days drive.
You did the tunnel underneath the water?
Yeah, I did that.
That's
yeah,
scary.
Yeah, that was also a great experience. That's something you can't forget. And yeah, I just landed there, and I remember first week I just had to find any job. So first I went to Scotland, to Edinburgh. I took my portfolio with me with all the drawings and like a paintings on paper that I had, just in case if I decide maybe enroll to school. I really didn't know what I'm doing. It was like one of those things you make this decisions, and at the end it takes another year or two before you actually realize that it takes so much effort and time to achieve it. So
you studied painting in your bachelor, but you were prepared for the bachelor because in your high school you had mentioned to me outside of the podcast that you went to a school that was very prestigious for young painters.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember you saying something about you were awarded something.
Yes. So when I was in high school, I was maybe not the most talented. So my interest in drawing and painting was like since I was 7, but that doesn't mean that I'm the most talented. But I think that at that point, I outwork a lot of people in my class in high school. And I had a friend who was really extremely talented. He even didn't have to spend that much time after school to just do things. He just like did them, and they were great from the beginning. I had to, on the other hand, like either do it several times before I got it to that point, or just practice a lot. And that's what I did. So I went going home and I spent another 4 or 5 hours just drawing, trying to get to that stage where my friend was, because he was always praised by the teachers. And I think that at some point I caught up with him at the final year of the school. And I remember I had that great teacher. He was always like always there for all of us, and had this great attitude that no matter like circumstances, he always made it best of it. And I think that kind of attitude also like stick with me for a long time. And he was pushing everyone there, and also trying to send works for the competitions, like a young artist or like a young adult competitions. And I won most of them in all fields. I think it was painting, drawing, photography, in a spectrum of 1 year. And when I won one of the competitions in painting, that was a drawing, sorry. I remember this juries came to me, and they were professors from Academy of Arts in one of the academies of arts in Poland. And they told me that we want you at our school and we're going to offer you a place. And I remember I was so young and silly. I just said, like, I don't want to do it.
What?
So I had that little bit of a drive of what my brother also was doing. He had that like a business and he was like doing good. And I felt like I can do that too.
Yeah, you wanted to do your own thing.
So I just felt like maybe I don't need that. Maybe I just need to create things on my own term. And I remember that was painful experience because I applied to other Academy of Arts in Poland and I didn't get in. And that was that moment of realization that I just turned down the opportunity that could have been really good and could have moved me forward for that time. And I just decided not to do it.
But it was a school in Poland.
That was a school in Poland, yes. And, but then I kept working with my brother at his company for a year or two, I think. And during that time, I got that job offer for movie production.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we make those decisions that affect us in a sense that they don't bring quick results or results that we see over time. And it could be painful at first, but over time, when we see the entire spectrum of those decision-making process, it seems like it was a good decision.
Yeah. And then how was the process of getting into the Manchester University for your Bachelor of Arts? Were you on scholarship there?
I think that England doesn't have that scholarship process like it works in US. It's basically you enroll and they just either accept you or not. And based on that, I think they have like a grants for students and student loans, obviously. And so that's how I got in. It was pretty simple process. I was already, I think 1 or 2 years in England. So I was trying to get my English on track. And I just went there with my portfolio from the school that I did a couple years ago, a couple of years before that interview. And they just look at it and they liked it. So they said like, okay, we'll just give you an answer soon. And that's how I got in.
Nice. And is it expensive to pay for school in the UK?
Well, I think it was okay for me. So maybe if you would talk to people in England, like native speakers or native people there, they might probably say, yeah, it's so expensive, to pay for the school. 1 year costs this and this. And then on top of it, you take a student loan or whatever grants, whether you get them or not. And I remember thinking that my perspective is a little bit different. I'm foreigner. I came here with that thinking that nobody will pay my bills, so I have to sort it out from the beginning. Put those things in order, make savings. So I think that thinking didn't really stop me from whether it was costing or not. But on today's day, I pay the student loan still. So it's kind of...
Yeah, I'm part of that club too.
Yeah. And I probably could pay it off much earlier. But at the same time, I'm just thinking like, do I pay it off or I like put that money into something else, invest in myself or invest in what I do? So it's always that decision, like what is better? So you have to trade at some point.
Yeah, I'm in that same boat with my student loans. I can either pay off a little bit each month for, I don't know, the next 10, 20 years, or I could slap all of that money and just throw money at it and get it paid off in 2 years. But, I could put that money in an investment even that however much money I'm in debt for, that money, and I'll have more money in that 10, 20 years then I would be way below how much money I could be worth in that sense. But also, yeah, I want to enjoy the life that I have right now, and I want to go on vacation, or I want to travel and see the world, or I want to invest in my podcast gear, or yeah, just traveling and seeing different artists or things like that. You kind of have to choose to live your life.
Yeah, that's true. It's that finding that balance and priorities. But like nowadays, I feel more and more like I just want to get rid of that loan because it's just kind of like stays there every month.
It's a burden.
Yes, it's a kind of like why I have to do that. Maybe I could, instead of paying that loan, I can maybe pay something else, or like just kind of things like that. It's just I think that everything depends on the perspective you have in front of your eyes, like whether it's education, your career, profession, work, and also what they call it, financial literacy, right? So I think that depends too. The more you get knowledge about how to make money and invest them, the more those kind of things like student loan and other debt become sometimes secondary because you know how to manage those things. So I think that that is also important, and something that as an artist I probably don't know enough. So which I wish to change that too.
In your education, they never. I don't know how the school is. I did do my master's degree in Europe, but it's kind of different in every country. Did they make you learn liberal arts education?
My study at Manchester School of Art was studio based. So I went there in the morning and till evening I was just painting, and in between maybe you had a artist talk or some like a history course, which was probably not that big of a deal, and that's it. There was no kind of taking classes or switching to the classes you might like maybe taking a business class or I don't know, art class or some other helpful or kind of interesting
They
things.
didn't even give you the option?
No, maybe other universities are set up that way, but I think it's not as it's not the same way as it is here in the US.
Mm-hmm.
And which I liked it because not that long time ago, a week ago, I had a workshop with students at SMU, and most of those students are not into art. They're like business major or finances major. So they come there, and my impression of it was like they think that it's a easy like a score for them. So they taken it, and then they come in, and then they realize that no, actually it's not. This teacher really is demanding me to like make it look perfect, and they get disappointed about it. So I always I learned to look at it from their perspective, that you are not here to be an artist. You are here to understand the process of making art, what kind of artists go through by you experiencing your pain with doing these things you have to do for the class, and then think about it as a philanthropic way of your future. You're going to be in business, or you're going to have a good job, and you have extra money to invest in, maybe in art, and you will know how the art works, what to look at, and what things you should care about in art in general. So that can be like a form of giving back to community. So at the end, I think it's about switching that point of view and make it more usable for future things that you might use or not, but might be good.
Are these things that you portrayed to the students that you were in the workshop with?
Yes, I think that at the end, that's what I mentioned, that it's all about for you to understand it, not to be an artist, and but understand it how artists struggle with maybe even making work, and then at the end you would decide how to give back to community by understanding what you have learned at the class. So,
How did doing your bachelor and master's of art affect your career, affect your ability and technical skills?
I think I was lucky enough that when I went to that private secondary art school um, uh, for drawing and painting, that they really the input was on understanding figurative and traditional drawing and painting approach. So that gave me like a really solid skills that I used in Manchester School of Art without thinking about it, but focusing more on exploring the concept of painting and like a conceptual side of my art rather than just trying to build the skills. And then I also faced many kind of troubles from other like students that they didn't have that skills, and then they were focusing already on the conceptual side of the work rather than combining those two together. So at the end, you get a little bit maybe lost, but it's just one way of saying it. Just it's a matter of putting hours into maybe a practice. But when I went to Manchester School of Art, I thought about this course as a job. So I didn't think about it as something that is a great time to have and, go and drink every night or not showing up in the studio. I was treating it as a job from day one, job that I have to pay for. That's how I thought about it. And I think if with that mindset, I just realized that there are bigger things I want to get than just this course.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a fantastic way to look at it. You're literally paying to work for an entity.
I think so. Yeah.
You're working for yourself, essentially. You're building your portfolio for your future. But that's one thing I appreciate you, Bartosz, is you do work very hard and you like to keep a clear mind when you're in the studio and you're working. How do you balance life and socializing and, enjoying your vices with your art career nowadays?
I think that socializing is a hard part, and balancing the work and family. That's something that I struggle with now and last couple of years. It's just because when I was in Europe, European, I think they don't work as much as people in the United States, and not because they don't like to work. It's just because it feels that the work you put in gives you output of something that you can live off. Here is almost opposite. It's just like you need to put more work in order to get like similar results maybe. So like, for example, just being an artist, I don't think that that's enough for me right now with the family. Beside painting, I also do other things. And I start thinking about myself more as a entrepreneur rather than just an artist. And that is something that I learned here in the US. And one of the examples, for example, a couple of years ago, I needed a recommendation letter for one of the applications. I think it was like artist in residence, something like that. And I remember I asked my professor from Manchester School of Art to write me a letter. And I sent him an email with the draft of the recommendation letter that I already pre-wrote for him. And then he replied to me saying that this must be American way of conducting things because we don't do that in the UK. And I felt something true about it, that here it's not only about doing those things, but you always have to be that step ahead in order to make sure that you succeed.
The American culture and European culture are very different in this world of working. Americans are very much work, be productive, and then possibly you'll reap a reward. But in Europe, it's more, I don't know, it's more skill-based, and you're living more your life, and you have a lot more leisure, and people focus on personal happiness rather than just work, produce.
I agree. And maybe that also goes back to the system. Like healthcare is something you don't have to worry about in Europe. And whether that's good or bad, I don't know. But here...
I think it's good.
That's good, yes. But here, you definitely have to think about it. If you're young and healthy, maybe not as much, but older you get, you probably... that's one of the things you have to think about. Another one is retirement. And those things tend to keep workforce focus on work and not about like experiencing life or enjoying it. So if you want to pursue your passion, you have to also keep in mind those other things too. So that's where the balance is shifted and not equal comparing to the European countries maybe.
So after you graduated from your bachelor, your master in the UK, you went to Germany.
That was after my master's, yes. I was awarded with a scholarship from Manchester School of Art to Dresden Academy of Arts in Dresden, Germany, the same academy where Gerhard Richter was studying. So it was a great privilege for me to be at the same location where this great artist that I admire was studying, and it was a great time there. One of the things that I realized there that painting is not necessarily about technique, but about what you can do with it. And that just because all those artists that I met there at the academy, all of them were so great. They were very talented people.
Can you elaborate more on what they can do with it, that statement?
So at the end, we have that certain skill to draw or paint. And they became very technical oriented in terms of painting. So how you paint, what materials you use, how you finish the surface. And at the same time, they try to stick to the rules of how to draw and how to paint. So if there is a, let's say, example, you draw a hand. So they only do it the way that the hand's supposed to be draw or paint. But there is lack of innovation. Why not to break that rule? I already know how to draw it and paint it, so why not to play with it a little bit more? And I think that that's something that was lacking, and brought me that realization that painting is not about technique or not about the skill you have, but it's more about what you can do with it, in a sense that how you can express those different things that no one else saw before in the painting or the surface. Meaning that it could be just breaking into new style or imagining the painting the way that no one else saw before. And the UK artist, on the other hand, they maybe didn't have enough skills from the beginning when they show up at the school to draw or paint, but they had that vision of what they can do with the painting. So maybe the skill is not there, but the cockiness and freedom of conducting the painting on the surface was definitely there, allowing them to explore more what painting is about. And I think that was that realization that I got from comparing those two approaches to the painting.
That's very interesting. So with these people, what did you learn from them? Being in a classroom with all these sharp minds that have the ability to conceptualize past the modern times.
I think at the end, maybe always it comes to what you can do after with that. Because we can be the greatest, or we can have the best painting, or do it the best way possible. But if you surround yourself with wrong people or wrong environment, none of this will matter. And I think that when you graduate and you catch this momentum with exhibitions and attention that you get, that's when you grow. But if there is something on the way that will stop you from that attention or momentum, that's the plateau moment that you reach in your profession, I guess, or like a studio practice. And that's the moment when you either really wait for a long time until that next spike of momentum comes in, and then you jump in with your persistency and dedication to what you do, or you just give up. It's just like most of the startups, business startups. Most of them open and close within the first 5 years of doing business. And only those persistent and those with good ideas, and also those who just put their work in front of their mouth, then they succeed. Whether it's a great success or just enough to survive, that's another story. But I think that after the school, if you get momentum and attention from the beginning, it's about sustaining it. So something that goes back to Andy Warhol, who was so fascinated about media and the culture at that time, that he said something in a line that in the future, everyone will be famous for 15 minutes. And I think that that's the time we live in right now with all the social media and attention grabbers. And I think he also mentioned that the challenge will be to sustain that 15 minutes for a long time. Mm-hmm. And I think that everyone experienced that 15 minutes of fame, and one on another way. But at that moment, if you don't know how to sustain that for a long term, it comes and go. So it also can come and go, but it has to always appear at some time. And then that takes me back again to Eminem, the rapper. When he put the album out, he was like going on tours, promoting, and then he disappeared. And then you didn't hear for another, 8 months or a year, nothing. And then he appeared again with a new album. And then he put himself into that again. And then he disappeared again, unless somebody distract him or something like that. And I think that I don't apply that in my way of seeing the like a not studio practice, but like a business side of being an artist. I'm still don't see application to it. Not that that application doesn't exist, but it's just that 15 minutes of fame is constantly like in me, that what I have to do to keep that momentum up. And maybe within the last year, I started realizing more that maybe letting people forget about you and then jump in with new project and new kind of way of promoting yourself might be more beneficial than trying to keep up with those little elements of like posting daily, being active, keeping your mailing list once a month or whatever. Mm-hmm. So those are the things that I start to think about more and more. And a couple years ago, for the first time, I put my paintings online on my website, available for sale with pricing. And there is that stigma between artists, collectors, and galleries that's not something you're supposed to do.
Really?
Yes, because it just look passé, or like look just not professional maybe in some eyes. It definitely cuts a lot of
corners of the process, right, of art collecting.
Yes, because takes you a step further to just close that collection deal. But more and more I think about it now, I'm just more leaning toward actually minimizing their presence.
Online?
Yes, or exposing myself between um, demand and supply, and also thinking about how to conduct the process of interacting with audience. It's not only about collectors or anything like that. It's just about how I want to be portrayed as an artist. Do I want to be portrayed as someone who does a TikTok every day or Instagram, or I want to be portrayed as someone who is only accessible in the high end of art? And either I just skip all those things in between and wait until those right moments will appear, or I will just be consistent. So depends who you talk to. Probably they
The
will
younger
say,
generation's
right.
going to say differently. I think
Yes.
I just started to research a lot about artists on Instagram and TikTok since I started the podcast. And I noticed that a lot of these artists post their work online and they get, 10,000 followers, 20, 30, upwards to 150,000 followers just of them making videos of their work. I would say that I would guess that the younger generation would say that's the best way to reach the most masses. But I do like the perspective that you've stated, was that avoiding the social media, you're creating that scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
You're creating scarcity of people's access to you, which, in return can make you more valuable if you play your cards right.
Yes, that's true if you play them right, because if you think about it, if you don't keep in touch with your friend for a month, they will think about you. If you continue not keeping in touch, after 6 months, they forget about you unless you remind yourself. So that's the moment of that reminding yourself to the audience, how to balance that with all those kind of impulses that we get through the social media, as well as a way of like a marketing, I guess. And there are a couple ways of doing it. You either surround yourself with like great galleries as an artist, and most of those galleries already have like a group of networks that lift you up as an artist. And then maybe beside that, there is no need for other things. But if that doesn't happen, then the question is how you balance that vision of yourself in public.
You told me you met your wife in the UK,
Mm-hmm.
and this brought you to the United States. And I want to get into your experience in the United States versus Europe. You moved to Idaho, out of all places, Idaho, which is a very rural place if you're unfamiliar with the American states. It's a very rural place.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about that, the size of it comparatively? And
I remember landing on the Moscow airport. It was actually a city or town called Moscow, Idaho.
Well, they just had those Idaho murders in Moscow.
Yeah, that just really sad that happened. That's true. It's just almost like unbelievable that it just happened in the place where I lived for 5 years.
Crazy.
And yeah, it is crazy. But going back to the story, when I landed for the first time in Moscow, Idaho, it was a Pullman Moscow airport. It was really small. And I remember leaving the airport. It was pitch black, no lights. And that was that beep, like a heart beating, very strong, thinking, where am I and what am I doing? Like, it's almost like apocalypse is happening in front of your eyes and you have no way to opt out from it. You need to just like go with the flow and see what happens. And I think that I felt that way. Next morning, I remember my wife, she went to work. She worked at a local university. And I remember I just had to explore the town by myself a little bit. And it took me like maybe 3 minutes to walk through downtown. And
3 minutes.
3 minutes, yes. And then I reached end, and it was like open field almost, like nothing there, and it just
flat, right?
Yes. And it kind of scared me, like it's definitely not the place to stay. But at that time, again, I just had that momentum as an artist, so I didn't really care much about where I am, as long as the things were working. It's later on when the things start getting a little bit more tight, like the belt was more tight around me, and that's the time when I realized that I am missing the networking. I'm not networking, or not seeing the galleries, and I became that outsider with painting. So that was the time when I just decided that either I move myself or we move somewhere else.
Did you feel like? Sorry to interrupt. Did you feel like your relevance was shrinking?
Yes, definitely. It goes back to that element of if you don't show up for 6 months, people just forget about you. Yes, and I think that would happen to me. I just felt like this artist with a great exhibition record and great press that I got in UK, and then suddenly that's felt to me like it's irrelevant, because there is some sort of gap in between that is not filled with anything. So that's how I felt, and I feel that today till this day, like that there is no momentum that I carry on. It's just like I feel like I'm constantly against some type of walls, because nobody sees me what I did. They see that present moment, and unless they dig a little bit deeper into what I did, then there is that moment of realization that like it's not somebody who just appeared out of nowhere. And another thing about the United States that I realized, that you can't take a train or bus and then get to another city within an hour. You just have to fly there for 5 hours, rent a car and book a hotel. It's just so different. And living in Idaho brought me that realization that I have to be either in the major cities like New York, LA for art. And I didn't think that Dallas would be a good place to do that. I thought Miami might be actually better than than Dallas.
Yeah.
But again, my wife got a job here, so at that time I said like, well, anything other than Idaho. So we just moved to Texas, Dallas, and I've been here 5 years, and I like it, but I still think that the art scene here is very small, and it will take maybe another 10 years, maybe 15, to maybe reach the size of, like, I wouldn't, probably not Miami or like
Chicago.
Maybe Chicago. Yeah, maybe we can compare it to like Chicago. But it's most likely will never be that major art scene. It always will be that secondary for other artists. And most likely, from what I see here already, is that all those really nice galleries in Dallas, they most likely show artists that are outside of Dallas or Texas, just because they want to sound a little bit more like international or like national.
Yeah.
And those artists that they already show here in the galleries, they either like a fresh graduate from the school, or people who you know for a long time. And I think that that's what I'm missing here, is like a little bit of a bubble that it's really hard to get in unless you have already something to say. And what I mean by it, that they already know who you are. So Um, I think about being an artist in a long term. So I look at it as like a big book, and this is just like a small chapter of my life, and I guess that helps me to get through. And at the end, I'm also looking at my father. He was always like in business. He was like starting business, closing business, starting new one. And I think that I have a little bit that in my DNA as well, because I like to think about business. I like to do other things. So when I came to Dallas, I thought about like if I would have infinite amount of money, what I would do with it. And one of the things was like I maybe would just open my own gallery, and I wouldn't be face of it. I would just have employees, but I would show other artists, other uh, exhibitions, and somewhere in between myself, and then just from then on, just build something that uh, be like a legacy of me, not only as an artist, but just as a like an entrepreneur, I guess. My goal, like as an artist, is to be in like a publishing in books, in art books, or have my work in museums and have a major exhibitions in biennales or museums, and I think that that will come at some point. It's just maybe not my time yet, just because of decisions that I made in like 5 or 10 years ago. I think that that still influenced my life, but at the same time, I learned so much about life of itself, and that it makes me think that artist is just a one thing that I can do. It's just when I look at those people who owns businesses, they most likely have more than one business. And when one thing succeeds, they move to another one, because they never know if, like, for example, recession comes, they never know which business will stay open, which not. So they like to have those multiple eggs in different baskets, and then develop them, and then at the end have that one umbrella under which they call themselves as a successful person. So I kind of think about it that way too. And so I'm thinking like that art is just a one thing, but I would like to have some other businesses.
Success in other
Yes.
areas of
Mhm.
life.
Yeah.
So in Dallas, do you think that there is a lack of artists, which is why they outsource nationally and internationally at these galleries? Do you think that we're lacking in the number of artists to showcase here?
No, I don't think so. There is a plenty of great artists, even I don't know about, and maybe never shown in Dallas. It just even like in Idaho, in the last 6 months before we left, I met there are few artists whose work was really great, and I was like, "How come that you are here and nobody knows about you?" And it just they kind of were in the same situation as I was, just like small town, nobody cares, and like what else you can do here? You need to go outside. And I think it's the same with Dallas to one degree, because it's not just like a one single answer to it. It's a little bit more complicated than that. I think that there is plenty of artists and they're hungry for success. It's just the scene has to still grow. There has to be more people who uh, make those areas available for those artists, whether that's podcast, whether that brands being more involved with artists, companies, anything. Even looking at the local galleries, I think that they could branch out even more with their galleries being focused on like a national approach, but also do something a bit more that approach the community here.
The local community. I agree with that. Do you think the arts should be funded? It seems like there are a lot of artists here that are hungry for success and want to grow, but they seem to lack in the resources available here in the city of Dallas. It seems to me that even with other artists that I've recorded with, they have mentioned having funding as a barrier to them doing things with their craft. For instance, having shows or, just showcasing their art in any type of way. And they end up having to take out loads of money that puts them in debt, and it causes them to have to seek other cities and other places to, get what they want out of their craft and succeed.
Yes, it's a good problem to solve, and I look at it from a few ways. Going back even to my high school, that joint teacher and painting teacher, he always the school shrinked at some point. We moved the locations, and we didn't have that big studio, painting studio, as we had in the previous school. And then every student was complaining. And I remember he said, it's not about the space, it's about what you can bring and do with it. And I think that goes back to it. And another thing, when I moved to Idaho, I didn't have a studio for 1 month. And I also complained to my artist friend in Spain that I can't paint because I have no studio. And then he said to me, like, you're an artist. The lack of studio shouldn't stop you from making art. And I think those kind of approaches change my mind in terms of thinking of resources and funding. That lack of the funding or resources shouldn't stop us from making our step or like a visible sign in the society or community. And if you do it that right from the beginning, the funding will come along at some point if you like dedicated and committed. Maybe goes back us also to networking as well. It's just like when we moved to Dallas, I was trying to surround myself with artists and people in like teaching and just other folks that I kind of knew. And then I realized that that maybe not necessarily is the circle that I want to be around. So I kind of, in a way, forcefully stopped like meeting those people. And I tried to like go, I went once to like a networking group here in Dallas, which was not like a fail experience. But then I kind of start looking at it like, what if I start to get in people in like really great professions, like, I don't know, lawyers or realtors who are really successful. And I didn't know how to do it. So
to get them at these networking events?
Yes, well, that could be maybe a one way, but I never really follow up with that. What I did when we moved to Dallas, we got to know a person who is like a judge here in Dallas. And we got to know him through a friend of ours who lived in Idaho. The world is really small. And he became my mentor here in Dallas. So I kind of start asking him about all those kind of people, like who can I meet? And so he kind of started taking me to like a lunch or dinner with those people. And then from then on, there was enough to just get to know that one person who liked it you enough to connect you with those other people. And I think that that's now how I kind of learn about other way of living than just being an artist. Because as long as I think that being an artist is great and very romantic idea, as well as like fascinating, you can be whatever you want. But at the same time, there is other side of the mirror that has also interesting life. And more I experience in that, I want to find a balance in between those two. And when I look at the Damien Hirst or even Jeff Koons, those two great disliked artists who are very successful, they basically did that. they just at some point that with the struggles as an artist, they realize that it's not the masses, but those little connections, but great connections of success with successful people will get you there, get you to that point where you want to. And maybe it goes back to that saying that you become who you surround yourself with, I guess, right? It's just more about to learn from them how they actually make money, how they think about money, and
Okay.
what you can do with that resources to make your better life. Most of those people, they're not looking outside of success. They don't want to be famous on social media, or they don't want to have followers of 100,000 people or whatever. They just like hidden grades in the on the streets. You won't even sometimes tell that those people have a lot of money. It's just about their mindset, like access their mindset and their thinking process behind finances, understanding money, and understanding the culture that comes with it.
They live in a different world.
Yes.
And I think they're very separated from the rest of us, normal people in society. The way that they think, the way that they live, their social circles, where they frolic, all of those things. I mean, they're totally segregated from normal people in this world. And I think it creates this barrier to getting past this understanding of money. You have to be born in the family or be closely connected or working in a business environment where you can make friends with these types of people. Otherwise, unless you read books and you search for that knowledge yourselves, a lot of times you don't know what to look for.
Yes, that's true. You don't know, and also you'll be always outsider for those people too. If you like have, I look at it from the perspective of I'm an artist, and to them I'm already unique. And I think that I just try to think about it that way. Just I have my uniqueness that you don't or they don't.
So you don't feel like an outsider?
No, I try not to. I just try to think about it as I have a lot to bring to the table, just like you. And you can learn as much from me as I can learn from you. It's just a different skill set that they have and that I want access to. Not access in a way that use it in a way, but just learn from them. Just understand the process so I can apply it much faster than just spend another 10 years to trying to figure out that on my own.
Oftentimes you can't do it by yourself. You need to have this network of people because otherwise the opportunities aren't open for you.
Right.
You need to have those opportunities and integrating yourself into that business world as well. While being an artist, I think that's very important. I think I started on the business side first, the technical, nerdy side of education. And I got into the job force. And later on is when I started to emphasize my artistic side. And I'm really grateful for, having a job that I can support myself with and feel financially secure. And now pour, my extra hours that I'm not working and have enough energy into my creative craft.
Yeah, that's right. And also finding that balance at the end is also hard. If you want do multiple things at the same time. And what I learned from my experience and over time from other people as well, that they can't do things by themselves. And I think that I realized that too when I moved to Dallas at some point, that it's just the time when I want to save that time on other things. And as long as I'm just can outsource that and somebody can do that the same way I do, that's fine. And I think I've been doing that for the last 3-4 years. So I have virtual assistants. I don't have physical people coming to the studio and working with me, but I do outsource those things to virtual assistants, and that speeds up a lot. So I have a couple that are with me for the last year, so it's easier to just kind of show them from the beginning what I want and the way I want to do it. And sometimes they just leave and move on, and that's a bit more complicated because I have to find somebody else and then, in a way, train. Um, but I see it, and when I look at those big artists who are successful and have a great gallery representations, uh, they don't do things by themselves. And even if it appears like they do, they either have the assistants in the studio who help them with the painting, even that, or those people who work behind the scenes on social media marketing, on sales, on connecting or calling people. And I guess my one of my dreams is to have a sales team and marketing team in my own studio, where I just come in and I have those people that I know that will do the job for me.
Do big artists have this?
No, I think that most of the artists, including myself, still have that romantic approach to the art, that you are in the studio painting, maybe get drunk, and and then paint, and that approach that nowadays maybe all I post on the social media and everything comes to me because that's how it happens, but it's not. And I think that
What do you mean the posts come to you? I didn't understand.
I'm sorry, I was maybe not clear. That do a little bit of a marketing, maybe like through like social media or like trying to stay on the surface, and then they think that, including myself, that will solve a lot of problems, but actually it maybe adds to the problems rather than solving them. Because what I also learned from the last couple of years that marketing is not sales, and we often think about it that way, that sales is a marketing, but it's not. It's two separate things that meet at some point at the end, but those two different entities. And most of us just focus on that one entity, marketing, which brings sales as well, but it's not the main drive of attention, and it's not the main backbone for the business. It's a sales that drives everything and drives the marketing as well. If you have no sales, there is no marketing. You have no time for it, and sources and time, money. And I think that every artist at the end want to be in the studio and paint. I want that too. I want to go in the morning to the studio, have a coffee, sit down and watch the painting, and in a couple hours paint, like in those movies about artists that you watch, they like 3 a.m. in the morning, they just paint, or like, I don't know, do all kinds of things. And I think that maybe that's the kind of like an outside view of an artist. I hope I don't know if that's inside as well. But my approach in the last couple of years is different. It's just, I go to studio, I have 3 hours, I have to nail it in that 3 hours. So no phone, nothing around me, just like, unless I document the work that I do, or the process rather. And that's it. 3 hours later, I'm off to home. I need to see my daughter, my wife. I need to do other things. And as I said earlier, I want to have also other businesses too. And in order to grow that, that needs time as well.
I love all this. I've never really thought about this whole idea between marketing and sales. And then I was going to ask you, what does your day-to-day look like? And you just went right to it. I also am on this like thing with the marketing and the sales. So essentially for me with the podcast, the sales would just be listens. And I wonder like how much, the marketing, the social media effort, how much actual impact it has on how many listens I have on the podcast.
Well, with every medium is a little bit different. Like a podcast is like a one medium, and that could do way better than maybe being just an artist and paint and trying to show your work. The way it works is that um, um, always always action is required. So more action you put in, the more maybe output you get from it. And but I think that there is no one answer to it. So every artist or every person or business will work a different way. And I forgot what was the question.
I mean, it wasn't really a question. It was just essentially talking about where sales and marketing cross over.
Right.
And that point of cross section is where, you know, more marketing isn't going to help or drive your sales.
Right.
But in the sense of like, with podcasting, you were saying like the different medium matters.
Could be.
And I agree with that. I think that the different medium does matter. With podcasting, though, you know, I couldn't monetize this for years. I would need, I think, 10,000 or 1,000 listeners, and I think I could make like $10 a month, which is crazy.
Right. When you look at those bigger businesses, and that they have YouTube channels, or they're trying to build that online presence, they're not doing that because that like a sales drive for them. They make a sales and get the clients for those businesses through like cold calling or outreaching or like referring or things like that. The social media is just, marketing is just like a one way of promoting yourself. So if some businesses have a podcast, that's usually is another way of promoting the business that they already have and there as a brand. So at some point when they have several businesses, it matters for them to have that one solid presence that over time can build something bigger than just that like a sales funnel for them. It's just a matter of the goals, like what goals you set up, I guess. And going back to artists again, more and more I think about it is just maybe that lack of presence actually might be more beneficial, maybe at least for me right now, than just that solid presence over and over, like without that momentum. So right now I don't feel like I have a great momentum with me. Even now, maybe having that artist in residence, which I think is a great thing, and all those kind of little exhibitions and events that I have, they don't excite me as much as maybe they did like 5 years ago. I think that I'm looking for something much bigger now, and maybe that's something outside of art field as well. I don't know.
Unfortunately, we're running out of time, so we have to get out of the Dallas library. It's closing in 30 minutes, but it was so great to have you on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. It was a great time to share my thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, you have great thoughts and you have great stories as well.
I think so. Everybody has a great stories, I think.
I agree with that. I love, my favorite thing about, especially in reading, is character development. Usually once it gets to the plot and the interesting, you know, the war or the fight breaks out, I put the book down. I like to get to know the person. And
that's an interesting way of looking at it too. I never thought about it that way. Just like really like getting into the character.
I love to get to know people and their hearts and their stories. And
right.
And I think that's what's gravitated me towards the whole podcasting thing, is my love for human beings.
Right.
I have an odd love for humans.
That's great.
Yeah, sometimes. Well, is there anything that is upcoming in the event realm?
Next week I have that event at RO2 Gallery here in Dallas. That is basically event you have to, I guess, pay for to attend, organized by one of the art foundation here in Dallas. And that tickets that got sold, they support Booker T. Washington, and it happens for over last 10 years. So they go, it's a bus tour that goes from one gallery to another, showing the artist's work. And it happened to be that this year I am one of them.
Nice. And how can listeners, if they're in the Dallas area, come see your art? Can they come to the RO2 gallery?
Yes, and actually there is even an opening tonight of the new space of RO2 in a Teen District. And other than that, next week, and I think we'll see in the future. I don't know.
Yes, well, this podcast, by the time you guys hear it, it'll be a week and a half from tonight. So,
Right. Things change quickly.
Yeah, well, you have, how can listeners connect with you online? Do you have a website? Can they see when you're having any upcoming events?
I think that the website is the best way. So, because we have so many sources to connect nowadays, I think that it's better to leave it to the audience to select it. So I guess Googling my name, Bartosz Beda, would be the best way, and then go from there.
Well, thanks so much for being on. It was so great to have you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you next time.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye.